Okay, tonight is Genesis chapter 21.
And the Lord visited Sarah as he had said, and the Lord did unto Sarah as he had spoken. For Sarah conceived, and bare Abraham a son in his old age, at the set time of which God had spoken to him. And Abraham called the name of his son that was born unto him, whom Sarah bare to him, Isaac. And Abraham circumcised his son Isaac, being 8 days old, as God had commanded him.
Now, as we recall in previous chapters, there's been a lot of talk about Abraham and Sarah having their own son, and it was the chapter where the angels and the Lord visited with them and told them, okay, this is it. Within this year, you're going to have a son. So now it says that it was done as was said. Right? As you see, it says the Lord visited Sarah as he said. The Lord did unto Sarah as he had spoken. Right? So even though she was 90 years old, this is it, she conceived and they gave Abraham a son in his old age. He was like 100. And so at the time that God said. So it said within that year, they conceived, they went through the pregnancy, and they had a baby boy. Right? And they said they named the baby boy Isaac. As you recall, when the Lord was speaking to them, he said that the baby was to be called Isaac. Right? And now the reason that he said it should be called Isaac is because Isaac actually meant laughter. Right? And if you remember that was kind of the way the news was greeted by laughter. So God said that this would be the name, would be Isaac. Okay, so they did as they were told and named the baby Isaac. And now it says in the 4th verse, that Abraham circumcised his son Isaac at the age of 8 days old, as God had commanded him. Okay, if you remember the part that talked about circumcision, right, that at that time Abraham and the others who had already been there, they were circumcised immediately, including his other son Ishmael, right? But of course now the instruction for newborns was 8 days old. Okay, so he did it on the 8 days old as was instructed, and as continues down even to today, to those who still observe that among the Jewish people, they still go with the 8 days old. Okay, so he followed the commandment of God. 8 days old, Isaac was circumcised, so he's all ready to go now.
And Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born unto him. And Sarah said, God hath made me to laugh, so that all that hear will laugh with me. And she said, Who would have said unto Abraham that Sarah should have given children suck? For I have borne him a son in his old age.
We've already mentioned how old Abraham was, 100 years old, just based on following the story, but just in case you were reading this chapter, by itself, so here it tells you Abraham was 100 years old this time when the baby was born, right? Pretty old to be having a newborn, right? But this is what God had said would happen, so that's what happened, all right? And then, and now see, in 6, when it says, Sarah said, God had made me to laugh, so that all here will laugh with me. See, here's a case where if you didn't know what the name meant, you wouldn't necessarily know what she's talking about, all right? When it says that, now I'm able to laugh and all that here will laugh with me, because it goes along with the name, because the name Isaac means laughter. So see, I'm bringing laughter into my home, right? And so now we're all able to be happy and upbeat and laughing and so forth. Okay, and then finally in 7 it says, and she said, basically, who would have thought, who would have said unto Abraham that Sarah should have given children suck? Okay. The word suck there meaning to breastfeed, all right? So again, who would have thought a woman 90 years old would be able to do that? Because when you're a woman and you're past the age of doing that, then those parts don't work anymore, right? It doesn't work that way. But here, she was 90 years old and was able to do breastfeeding, right? Because that's again, God wanted this to be a normal pregnancy, a normal birth, and a normal first couple of years for the baby.
And the child grew and was weaned, and Abraham made a great feast the same day that Isaac was weaned. And Sarah saw the son of Hagar the Egyptian, which she had borne unto Abraham, mocking. Wherefore she said unto Abraham, Cast out this bondwoman and her son, for the son of this bondwoman shall not be heir with my son, even with Isaac. And the thing was very grievous in Abraham's sight because of his son.
Right, so now a little bit of time is passing. It says, and the child grew and was weaned, right? So by the time the baby would have been, let's say, 2 or 3 years old, I mean, it actually did go like maybe longer than what they typically do today. But that was the time for the weaning, right? So that's when the baby would stop the breastfeeding and go on to regular milk or food or whatever it was that he could eat. And they typically had like a party for it. See imagine here having a weaning party, right? So they have a party to say that the baby is being weaned. Like they reached a certain stage in life where this was no longer, not a baby, now growing into a regular boy, right? So that was something that they had a little party for. That's why I said Abraham made a great feast the same day that Isaac was weaned, and they had people over to celebrate. And now in particular, what it says is apparently the same day, although it doesn't necessarily say that exactly, but it's generally believed it was at the same time as that it says Sarah saw the son of Hagar, which she had born unto Abraham, mocking, right? And I was going to say what that meant, all right? But by now Ishmael, the other son, right, would have been probably maybe 17 years old, 16, 17 years old, all right? And so this was his little half-brother here, and so again, whatever that means, we don't know, but it says that Sarah saw him mocking the boy, and so she got mad, right? And she said that this is a problem, right? I mean, it's, again, she's probably now second guessing, I'm sure, her original thought of, to Abraham, I'm just going to have a son with my maid, and since we're not having any babies ourselves, well now, you can't turn back the clock, so here now she has a 17-year-old boy there that's not really her son, and now it's causing friction with her and her son and so forth. So as you can see in 10, it says, throw them out, right? I don't want them here anymore. So it says, cast out this bondwoman who would be Hagar, the servant, and her son, right? Because her son's not going to be the heir. My son's going to be the heir, Isaac, so I don't want them around anymore, right? So she kind of demands that they be thrown out of the house. Needless to say, Abraham, I'm sure, felt something for Ishmael was his son, right? So they've been raising him. It was his only son for many years, and so even though it was not Sarah's son, they were kind of raising him as their own. So yeah, he felt bad about this. So I'm not happy. I would be happy to throw him out. I mean, it's still my son. So anyways, this is the position he's at this point. His wife is saying, I don't want them here. You need to throw them out, and he's like feeling bad. It's not really what I would want to do if it was my choice.
And God said unto Abraham, Let it not be grievous in thy sight because of the lad, and because of thy bondwoman. In all that Sarah hath said unto thee, hearken unto her voice, for in Isaac shall thy seed be called. And also of the son of the bondwoman will I make a nation, because he is thy seed. And Abraham rose up early in the morning, and took bread and a bottle of water, and gave it unto Hagar, putting it on her shoulder, and the child, and sent her away, and she departed and wandered in the wilderness of Beersheba.
Right, so as Abraham is kind of not sure maybe what to do, he's kind of upset at being put in this position, but now you see it says that God spoke to him, right? And he basically said you should listen to your wife, right? It says in 12, it says trying to be upset because of the lad, and Hagar says everything that your wife said, do it, right? Tell them to leave, because it's just causing a problem in your home. And it says, for in Isaac shall thy seed be called, all right? So, I mean, Isaac is your real heir. So, I mean, you do want to protect him, his mother. You want to make this as smooth as possible. So, to the extent that Hagar and Ishmael were in the way, they should go. But don't worry, he said, don't worry, I'm going to take care of them. Right? That's why it says in 13, it says, of the son of the bondwoman, I'll make a nation, because he's your seed too, right? So he's going to have his own descendants and his own family and so forth. And we had mentioned another time that was what's known today as the Arab nations, right, all came from Ishmael. So whereas the Jews, the house of Israel, came from Isaac, the Arabs came from Ishmael, right? So he did have a large family and descendants and nations and so forth. So God took care of him as well, even though they would be separate from each other. And so you think of how the Jews and the Arabs, have historically been at odds with each other, and now you see right here from the very beginning, Isaac and Ishmael are, now, I mean, not they were at odds with each other per se, because Isaac was still pretty young, but yet their mothers were at odds with each other, and so right from the beginning there was a problem there, so they separated and became two separate nations, if you will. And then in 14, is when they go, right? It says, Abraham got up, got bread, water, gave it to them, and then sent them on their way. It says, they wandered in the wilderness, and they went on their way from there.
And the water was spent in the bottle, and she cast the child under one of the shrubs. And she went and sat her down over against him a good way off, as it were a bow shot, for she said, Let me not see the death of the child. And she sat over against him, and lifted up her voice, and wept. And God heard the voice of the lad, and the angel of God called to Hagar out of heaven, and said unto her, What aileth thee, Hagar? Fear not, for God hath heard the voice of the lad where he is. Arise, lift up the lad, and hold him in thine hand, for I will make him a great nation.
Hagar and Ishmael are on their way out in the wilderness, and you see right away there's a problem. They've run out of water, right? And so I'm sure it's probably hot where they are, and so Hagar says, this is it, we're going to die here in the wilderness. So that's why it says that she went and even moved away from him. She left him sitting under a bush, and she went and sat somewhere else. I don't want to sit here and watch my son die, right? So she was that sure that this was it. I mean, we're out of water. This is probably like a desert area, so it's this is it. We're going to die right here, right? So it says, I don't want to see the death of the child. She went over and wept, but she was crying out to God, and now you see that again, it's nice that God hears this kind of cry, and that there's a response. As you see in 17, the angel calls out and says, "Don't worry." He says, God has heard what's happening. It says, "Arise, lift up the lad, and hold him in thine hand, for I'm going to make him a great nation." So I mean, if he dies right here, then it's not going to be a great nation. So that's why he's saying it that way, right? I mean, in general, you might say, well, what do I care about that? I just want to get a drink of water here. But of course, saying that he's not going to die right here because I have plans for him, and he's going to have children, and they're going to have children, and so forth. So no, he's not going to die here. He's going to live, and there is a future there. So even though again we think of Hagar as the outcast and Ishmael and so forth, but yet God cared about them also, right? That He was reaching out for them and telling them He was going to protect them, and I mean, there's still people, even though they were put in a tough situation, but I mean, there's still people who God cared about.
And God opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water, and she went and filled the bottle with water and gave the lad drink. And God was with the lad, and he grew and dwelt in the wilderness and became an archer. And he dwelt in the wilderness of Paran, and his mother took him a wife out of the land of Egypt.
After this conversation with the angel, right, it says God opened her eyes. She saw a well of water, right? It says, here you've run out of water, you have nothing to drink. Well, look over there, and there was a well of water, right? Now, was it there all the time, or did God just put it there? We don't know, but it says now she saw this well of water, and so they were able to drink, and they were able to survive this particular day and move on from there. And then 20 and 21, it kind of quickly moves through some of Ishmael's life there. It says God was with the lad, he grew, dwelt in the wilderness, became an archer, right? And in 21, he got married, right? Actually, it mentions his mother, I guess, picked out a wife for him, right? Whatever that means, took him a wife out of Egypt, right? So he got married, and then he would assume went on and had the children and so forth, because that's the way the story goes, and then down to today, right? And I believe this is actually the last we're going to hear about Ishmael, so that's why it just quickly kind of says, he went on his way, got married, and all the things that God promised is what was going to happen to him after that, because the story's not about him, it's about Abraham, Isaac, and so forth. So we're going to leave him here, but just know that God did provide for him and his mother and his family.
And it came to pass at that time that Abimelech and Phicol, the chief captain of his host, spake unto Abraham, saying, God is with thee in all that thou doest. Now therefore swear unto me here by God, that thou wilt not deal falsely with me, nor with my son, nor with my son's son, but according to the kindness that I have done unto thee, thou shalt do unto me, and to the land wherein thou hast sojourned. And Abraham said, I will swear.
So this Abimelech was the king of the area, right? And he's the one that Abraham said Sarah was his sister, that he took her in, and then found out that it was his wife, and so he kind of got annoyed, especially since God was about to punish him and his kingdom, right, because of that. So And if you remember, one of the things that he offered Abraham, I mean, he gave him some things, but also he said, pick out any plot of land you want. You can live here, right? You can live, in my kingdom. Pick out any place you want. So apparently Abraham did, right? So that's, he's been living in that area, right? So that's why he still has some interaction here with the king, right? So that's why he says they came, and he says, he says, hey, I can see God is with you, all right? So I don't want any trouble with you. I mean, he's probably thinking as a man of God, he could call down a curse on him or something if he wanted to, right? So that's why he said, I really don't want any trouble. So can we make an agreement that we're going to live together in peace, kind of like a treaty, a peace treaty, if you will, right? I mean, I don't know if there was any trouble anyway, but he's saying, I don't want any trouble, so why don't we just have an agreement that we're going to live together in peace? Right, so that's why 24 says, I will swear. In other words, I agree, right, that we should go ahead and live peacefully together.
And Abraham reproved Abimelech because of a well of water, which Abimelech's servants had violently taken away. And Abimelech said, I wot not who hath done this thing, neither didst thou tell me, neither yet heard I of it, but today.
Now, having said that they just had this treaty made, right, I mean, there was a little problem, as you can see. Right, it says that Abraham mentioned to Abimelech, or reproved him, that there was some well of water that his servants had violently taken away. Right, so some of the servants of Abimelech had taken away this well that really belonged to Abraham and his family. So he's telling the king, the one thing though, I mean, your servants got out of line here, right? They came and took away our well, and so you see what the king says. This is the first I'm hearing of it, basically. That it wasn't with the king's okay that happened, all right? The king saying, this is the first I'm hearing of it today, so I guess he would now take care of it now that he's been informed as to what happened. In 26, when it says, I wot not, it means I know not who has done this thing, right? It's just an old English way of saying the word know, K-N-O-W, so that's what that one means.
And Abraham took sheep and oxen and gave them unto Abimelech, and both of them made a covenant. And Abraham set 7 ewe lambs of the flock by themselves. And Abimelech said unto Abraham, What mean these 7 ewe lambs which thou hast set by themselves? And he said, For these 7 ewe lambs shalt thou take of my hand, that they may be a witness unto me that I have digged this well.
So as a way of kind of ending this particular dispute, right, that it said Abraham took sheep and oxen and gave them to the king and said, okay, now listen, you take this king, take these sheep, and this is going to be part of our agreement, all right? That going to be saying that you take the sheep, and then the well is mine, all right? So they're trying to settle this particular disagreement here, right? It says Abraham said 7 ewe lambs of the flock by themselves, right? And now it says the king says, what's the meaning of these 7, right? And now I don't know why 7 means this, but in 30 it says, For these 7 ewe lambs shalt thou take of my hand, that they may be a witness unto me that I dug this well. All right, in other words, I'm giving you these 7 lambs, and that means that the well is mine. Right? So, like I said, I don't know what the significance of the 7 is. Sometimes people like to use the number 7 in the Bible means different special things. All right, so whatever the reason, all right, that I'm giving you these 7 lambs, that means that the well is mine. So therefore, as long as you have the lambs, I know that the well belongs to me.
Wherefore he called that place Beersheba, because there they swear both of them. Thus they made a covenant at Beersheba. Then Abimelech rose up, and Phicol the chief captain of his host, and they returned into the land of the Philistines. And Abraham planted a grove in Beersheba, and called there on the name of the Lord, the everlasting God. And Abraham sojourned in the Philistines' land many days.
Okay, so it says, wherefore he called that place Beersheba. It says because that they swear both of them, right? I went looking for what the name Beersheba means, right? Because it says, therefore he called the name Beersheba. Well, I wasn't sure really what that meant. And it apparently has 2 different kinds of names there, right? One is, it means well of 7, right? Which would correspond to the 7 lambs, right? And the other is well of the oath, which means, because they made their agreement here, so therefore it was the well of the oath. So both of them referred to the well, right? But one referenced the 7, and one referenced the oath that they made. So that's what Beersheba means. And so, the only reason I point that out is because I'm kind of trying to figure out why it says, because of everything that happened, therefore they called the name Beersheba. Well, that's why, because it, I guess, recognized when it happened there, right? And and then, in 32, they made the agreement there, and Abraham, it says, planted a grove there, and then stayed in the land for a long time. Now, it mentions that this is the land of the Philistines. Okay, so now the Philistines were typically known again as ungodly people. So, and if you remember when he first arrived, it said that Abimelech was not a believer, right? And so it was not a godly arrangement. That's why Abraham was afraid. He said, if you remember, that he said that's why he wanted to say that Sarah was his sister instead of his wife, because he was afraid. Because he said, I know you people basically don't serve God, and so you're not. Anything's possible here, right? So, but yet the funny part, as we said, was that then God started speaking to Abimelech, and he had a dream and so forth, so maybe he was more of a believer after that, but the Philistines in general were known to be unbelievers, and so here Abraham's living amongst the unbelievers in this land because the king gave him this land, and so that's where he's going to live for now.